Step back, doors closing.
The Washington Metrorail system, at the time of this recording, currently has 98 stations under operation, and for at least the foreseeable future, it looks like it will stay at that amount with no stations currently in active development. This is enough to make the system the third largest in North America in terms of number of stations, behind New York, obviously, and Chicago. But with Washington gearing up to almost reach triple digits, I figured it would be fun and interesting to rank all 98 stations on a tier list from S tier down to F tier. And I'm sure if you have gone on the internet ever, you understand what is going on here. But for those who haven't, I have each station and I'll place it on this chart corresponding to how I'll rank it. And S tier is generally the best, and F tier obviously is the worst, just following that nomenclature. Before I begin, I want to preface a couple of things so I don't hear you in the comments. I will be ranking stations based on the effectiveness of each in providing transit services. So the goal of a transit system is to get passengers where they need to go quickly, reliably, and comfortably. I'll be assessing each station using that criteria. Basically, another way to look at it, if the planners of Metro could see the station as it appears today, how satisfied would they be? Would they have any revisions? Would they be proud of what they did? Would it be effective? On one hand, this means stations that are underbuilt and don't have requisite facilities to match current demand and use would be located low. But on the other side of the spectrum, stations that are overbuilt also will not be ranked highly, just by the fact of pretty much the other side of the coin with demand not matching these station facilities. So we'll get into that in a minute. I also want to note we will not be considering architecture or overall aesthetics unless such is so great that it impacts the station's ability to provide effective transit. So I know Washington Metro has been blessed with a really beautiful and consistent architecture scheme, but I won't be considering that, especially some outliers. Architecture is great to have, but again, the point of transit is to get people from point A to point B quickly, comfortably, and reliably. I also will try to only consider factors that are in WMATA's control. For instance, like Dulles Airport is inconvenient just by the fact of it being located so far from downtown. I'm not going to critique the metro station there for being located so far from downtown. Obviously, the airport came first and the train station just adapted to serve that. I recognize this is tough and a bit of a tricky situation because it's often a two-way street where metro stations can shape their surrounding communities just as surrounding communities could shape metro stations. Also, I want to make it clear this is not a ranking of favorite stations. There are many charming and enjoyable stations that provide deficient transit service. If your favorite station or the station that you use each day is ranked lowly, please understand that it's not a critique of that station as an enjoyable place to you in the community, but rather it could be re-established to have a more effective transit presence. And then last thing to note is I will be assessing transit and station infrastructure as they currently exist, for better or for worse. So I won't consider how the station functioned upon opening, nor will I account for any potential modifications that are currently in the pipeline. I will try and mention these just for the sake of clarity and people might be interested. But in terms of assessment, I'll be focusing on how it currently is at the time of recording in 2024. Lastly, some of you might be wondering, why am I qualified? Well, I'm just doing this for fun, but I do want to note that I have visited every station in the Metrorail system at least once, most of them many times in my life. And I've entered and exited at about 85 of the 98 stations. So I've passed through all of them. And this is just my opinion at the end of the day. If you have any thoughts, I understand, and I'd love to hear them in the comments. So with all that out of the way, let's dive on in to the tier ranking. And as you can see, I'm just using Tier Maker, and I am going to begin just alphabetically. I figured that would be the most fair. And alphabetically, the first station in the system is Addison Road, Seat Pleasant. And at the time of opening for almost exactly 20 years, this was the terminus of the Blue Line. And as a terminus station, it probably would have been F tier. It was an incredibly poor-suited, poorly designed station to serve as a terminus. But fortunately, today there are two more stations beyond it. You have Morgan Boulevard and Largo. So it's now just a standard community station. I don't think it's particularly great at that because you could definitely see that it was designed as a terminus station with the amount of parking available and the relatively poor connection to the surrounding communities. Only one entrance on the, west side of the station, and it's not a particularly well-developed, dense area. So I'm going to rank it at a D tier. It would probably be an F tier if it were still the terminal, just because as a terminal station, it's tough to access, not close to the Beltway. But even today, the legacy of that with the just too large parking garage there, just poor connections as a community station makes it very deficient. Next up, we have Anacostia Station. And this one, my gut says to put it at a C. And on one hand, it does have that big garage, but it's not particularly well utilized for that. It has a direct access to 295, the Anacostia Freeway, and but I just don't get the sense that there are many commuters that use that as a park and ride station. If you're coming from further out in the suburbs, particularly beyond the Beltway, it's almost easier to go to Branch Avenue or points elsewhere. And if you're more closer to the city, I feel like there's other stations that also have ample parking, Southern Avenue, Suitland, Naylor Road, that potentially could be closer. In terms of a station for pedestrians, it's unique because it has two entrances and it straddles the interstate. And the north entrance is just incredibly unnecessary, where it basically serves nothing. It serves that park and ride garage and the national park, the Anacostia East Bank, which isn't really enough to warrant its own entrance. The south entrance is very good. It's integrated into its community, has a nice bus loop, a decent amount of residences. So that's why I put it at a C. If it were just the north entrance, it probably would be a D. I guess I should mention the architecture here, obviously not taking this into account, but I'm not a huge fan of the architecture style that they have at this station. It's unique, and I give them props for doing that. It was necessitated by the soil and the geography of the current layout with the water table. But I'm glad it's only just one station. Let me just leave it at that. Next up, we have Archives, which was the first station opened unique to the Yellow Line. And this is located in between two transfer stations. And it is interesting because it's mainly tourist-driven. I suppose there could be some offices on the north side of Penn Quarter, some restaurants that get served by it. But in general, it's serving tourists hitting the north side of the National Mall. And I'll probably rank it as a B. It's not overbuilt. It's not underbuilt. It's solid. I feel like an entrance on the south side directly serving the National Galleries would be pretty useful and honestly might even get more use than the north entrance. I do have to say DC definitely needs a station here, with Pennsylvania Avenue being the premier avenue in the entire city. You have parades, you have inaugurations go down there. It makes sense to have a station there. I just feel it could be better tooled, but maybe a south entrance as well. Or if the entrance were more centrally located and not on the north side of the station, but potentially accessing both Pennsylvania Avenue and Constitution, that would probably make this a little bit better. Next up is Arlington Cemetery, and this might be the first F station. It is incredibly overbuilt. It is routinely among the lowest ridership stations, and it makes sense. There's almost zero accessible locations besides the cemetery itself. From the station is almost half a mile just to the Lincoln Memorial, and that's on the other side of the bridge. So I guess that could be accessible, but very few people use it like that. Under the original system, the designers didn't even want a station there, and they ultimately were forced to build it by Congress, passing a statute mandating a station there. So it's the only station that wasn't expressly added to the adopted regional plan, which I find interesting. But even in terms of it being there, it isn't right size for its use. Like, why would a station like this need two entrances on each side of Memorial Drive? Why is the mezzanine directly under the platforms? I feel like could have been cheaper, more effective to just do a standard one, either to the side or even above. Could be unique. I understand kind of building it in the historic bridge and the right-of-way kind of forced the hand there. But I feel like there are ways to make this station much more right size for the amount of demand it has. Uniquely, it's the only station that closes early before the rest of the system, and it varies on time of year. But I think that should show you just how ineffective this is as a mass transit station. And granted, there are days where this gets ample ridership. Coming to mind is potentially like the wreath ceremony every December at the cemetery or other historic days. So there are peaks, and it's close to the National Mall where for rallies and other events, it can serve some of that load, but it's just poorly designed to do so. Next up, we have Ashburn. This is the first terminal on the tier list currently, besides Addison Road, which we discussed earlier. I'm going to rank this probably a B because it's just incredibly far from the city. That's beyond WMATA's control, but it's just real far out there, and it's in the median of an interstate, or not an interstate, but the Dulles Greenway, a median of a highway, and that really limits its development and growth potential. There's just strip malls on each side. There's some development coming up on the north side, but I went with a friend a couple weeks back to the Red Robin, which is right in that strip mall. Even from the entrance of the station to the restaurant, it took almost 15 minutes of walking. It's just not pedestrian accessible. And granted, this station is designed to have commuters from further out in Loudoun County come and park, and there are uniquely two pretty massive garages at the facilities operated by Loudoun County and owned by Loudoun County. So in terms of that, it is solid at getting people onto the system, but even from Loudoun, if you're going to downtown, it's going to take 70 minutes. So to drive in, board the train, go into downtown, it's not particularly effective at moving people into the city. Okay, next up, we have Ballston, and Ballston is probably an A station. It has completely revitalized that area, incredible density. In terms of the whole region, the single most dense census tract is downtown Ballston, and that is largely fed by this station. It gets a ton of use. The reason why I won't put it as an S tier is, I guess it's twofold. One is I'd like to see a wider pedestrian basin, catch basin, around the station, and that is currently being worked on. There's a west entrance plan to build one at Vermont and Fairfax. And I think that would probably take it to an S tier if that were built. As it is now, it's relatively central. The elevators are kind of unique there, where they have multiple street elevators, but only one down to each platform, and they kind of straddle each side of Fairfax. Ideally, I would like to see an actual escalator entrance on each side of Fairfax, too. It was built with kind of the sub-mezzanine to do so, so maybe in the future we'll see that. But I'm really nitpicking. It's a solid A station. Just a couple of things that could really take it to the next level. Benning Road is up next, and I think this is probably a B tier. It is really solid for what it is. It has one entrance at two key corridors, close by to businesses, close by to some residences and neighborhoods, close by to some schools and some parks. So it really has that great community around it to really serve a mass transit station. I think the reason why it's here is there's nothing too special about it, but it really gets the job done. A little bit hilly around there. Again, nothing you could really do about that from WMATA. You know what? Talking through, I might move it up to an A. It's just a really solid station. Next up, we have Bethesda. And Bethesda on the red line is currently undergoing plans to build a south entrance. And as of now, I think I'll put it at a B. When that south entrance opens, probably move it up to an A, potentially an S tier, depending on how that transfer point with the purple line turns out. I'll have to test it, see how effective that is. As of now, it has that one entrance in the north. It's incredibly deep, so it takes forever to get down. Makes it ineffective transfer. But where it does come up, that is undoubtedly the central point of the Bethesda Business District. Have the Fortune 500 Marriott headquarters nearby. You got single-family neighborhoods, but neighborhoods no less within walking distance. And you get the bus bay with many buses to Montgomery Mall, to Potomac, points further out, Chevy Chase. So a pretty solid station. I feel like its depth and currently only one entrance on the north side is really what's limiting it. Those knockout panels do exist, and they're currently building the south entrance, so we'll see how that goes. Next up, we have Braddock Road, and Braddock Road is probably a C-tier station. It is relatively close to King Street. I just don't think the densities are there to make two stations so close together. Plus, the layout of the railroad kind of makes the access a little bit constrained. It's mainly focused to the east side, and the neighborhood to the west, Delray area, isn't particularly well served by this. One entrance is fine, has a nice bus bay. No real park and ride facilities. They got a couple of kiss and ride, but that makes it fine. I feel like in an ideal world, this would maybe be a bit further spaced from King Street, maybe better access to each side of those train tracks, kind of augmenting that natural barrier rather than playing into it. Next up, we have Branch Avenue, and this seems like a C station. Tons of just surface lots around it. Surface lots just take up a ton of the area for the station. I grant it is a terminal, so many people are driving to it, but as a terminal station, just not well suited. There's no direct connection to the Washington Beltway from the station, so that's a bit of a downside there. There has been talks of redeveloping it and building some transit-oriented development, which would be nice. We'll see. As I mentioned, we're ranking these on where they are today, and as it is today, it has a lot of parking. They don't usually get filled, so almost too much parking, especially post-COVID. And it's just not a great connection to the Beltway and points further south to do that. And right by the rail yard as well, that takes up a lot of the station area. But it's solid as a terminal. It's doing what it was intended to do. Next up, we have Brooklyn Catholic University. This is probably an A station. I think this is a good foil to Braddock Road, as we were discussing earlier. Brooklyn is also in the right-of-way of a mainline train track, but notice how it has entrances on both sides. It has a bus bay on the east side and has more development and connection to the university on the west. Very well done. I find it unique how the mezzanine is underground there, even though it's a surface station, but it definitely makes sense. There's plans to redevelop the parking lot and the park and ride and bus loop. We'll see how that goes. As of now, I think the bus loop is good for serving many parts of Northeast Washington. You see that as a big hub. And even into Maryland, parts of Hyattsville and further out have direct connections there, Fort Lincoln too. So it's very solid as it currently is developed, but there are potentially plans to go further. Next up, we have Capitol Heights, and this is probably on the same tier as Benning Road. Their neighbor stations are both underground, so they have solid development. This one straddles the D.C. Maryland line, and there's currently plans to redevelop that lot and remove the parking altogether. I think those plans are good. You know what? I'll probably put it as a B and then maybe elevated to an A if those plans are implemented, and see how that turns out. The lot wasn't getting much use, similar to Addison Road. It didn't make much sense to have a huge lot there. And Prince George's County in particular has really been working on trying to turn the blue and silver corridor into increased development. So we'll see how that goes. But as of now, it's a solid B. Capitol South, I'm going to put this as a D tier. I don't particularly love this station as it's designed, even though it's probably the third or fourth most used station for me in my lifetime. It has a pretty solid connection to a major employment area of the U.S. House of Representatives. So a lot of staffers there. Good location. The station is awfully deep, though, and the entrance is really geared solely to that employment center. And it poorly serves the neighborhood in South Capitol Hill. I guess I'd like to see, I get why it's so deep, and I think that's partially done to go underneath the mainline railroad, which surfaces right by there as well from its tunnel to Union Station. Maybe a C tier that I'm walking through this. As you see, as I talk through this, I kind of change my own opinion. It's good that it serves the employment center, but I think something at Providence Park serving that neighborhood would get lots of use. So there are a lot of row homes, so there's moderate density there. A lot of restaurants and shops down Pennsylvania Avenue too. We'll see. There's talk of the Blue Line Loop potentially adding a new entrance and new platforms there. So there's possible development in the future. Up next is Cheverly, and this is another F-tier station. It is straddled on one side by a railroad and on the other side by a pretty busy highway. Very poor connections to the surrounding communities. A huge parking lot that rarely gets used. Many people commuting in would just go to New Carrollton on the end of the line from there. Not much to say. I guess the lot is so underused, it's better used currently by solar panels. So they are building solar panels on the parking lot because that's better use than using it for transit. I think that speaks poorly of the transit system. I guess it's kind of unique to have side platforms, and its architecture is a little unique. But it just is, in an ideal system, it would be either removed or completely redesigned. Clarendon's up next, and this is down the Ballston-Roslyn corridor. This is probably another, I'd give it probably an A station. It's right on that line, so high B, low A, and I think I'll chip it in. It has one entrance, which is probably right size for the development there of that corridor. Clarendon is close. It was designed to be more restaurants and shop and relatively lower development compared to the high rises in Ballston and Roslyn. So this serves that well. One entrance is probably fine. It's right in the middle of that square, which allows a lot of accessibility. Pretty solid. I guess in terms of better, it's relatively close to Virginia Square and Courthouse. I get that that's kind of intentional. They were very adamant about having 5 stations between Roslyn and Ballston. And when you do that in a 2.5-mile stretch, you get pretty close stations. In an ideal world, it would maybe be a little bit further out. I feel that maybe that corridor could be serviced by only 4. So if you space them out a little further. But it's still very solid. There's nothing too much to sneeze at there. And it has direct connections to buildings nearby. Next up is Cleveland Park. This is probably, I'm going to put this around Bethesda too, because I feel it has similar critiques. just very deep, makes transfers very poor. No real bus loop or bus connection there, which is fine. Not every station needs that. There's a small business district right on Connecticut, and this serves it well. Served the Uptown Theater when that was open, serves those restaurants well when that was open as well. And it has entrances on each side of Connecticut, which I think is important. But there's nothing too exciting about this. It's relatively close to Van Ness, too, again, talking about the stop spacing. And the entrance is on the north side of the station. I feel like something closer to the National Zoo, talk about this later with the Woodley Park station, would have probably been better served. Next up is College Park. And this is probably this might be a D station. I'm not a huge fan of College Park as it's currently designed. The main core of this community is a university. This is about a mile away from downtown campus. Yet it's closer to some of the student housing, but it feels kind of lazy on how it was designed to build it mainly around the train tracks. And I get that was some of the constraints of building and construction in that area. But even so, it's not a particularly well-suited station to that. You get, on the west side, you got a community and a bus loop, and that serves it decently well. But you have a huge parking lot. Maybe this will move up when the Purple Line is built. We'll see. I'm not totally convinced that the Purple Line will solve many of this station's problems. You got like a historic airport serving most of the north side of the station area. So it's not there's not a lot of space to really redevelop, but we'll see how that goes. Columbia Heights is up next, and this might be an A station. It is incredibly well served. It's a top 10 station in terms of ridership. A lot of dense development around there, lots of businesses, lots of restaurants, a lot of nightlife. Its stop spacing is pretty solid, to be honest. It's not too close or too far from George Avenue and U Street. Ideally, maybe a second entrance on the south side of the station. Currently, there's one on each side of 14th, which is solid. But in terms of a second mezzanine, I feel like it could really spread out that catchment area. And it serves a dense area on its own right, closer to, I guess, where Florida intersects U and 14th. So I think that could potentially provide a little bit more utility, but it's still a very solid station as currently built. Next up, we have Congress Heights, and I think this is probably, I'll give it a B, but a B plus. So kind of on that cusp with Clarendon, where it's a solid station, serves a lot of neighborhood. There's not a ton of development by there. There's some potential to do so with the St. Elizabeth property, and you see the city government really pushing the WNBA and G League arena as potentially a destination by there. I think it's probably right size for its design and demand. So you know what? I think I'm going to move it up to an A. Again, talking myself through these stations. Has an entrance on each side of Alabama. Has a nice bus loop as well. No parking lot, which I think is probably suited for that area. Again, Anacostia to its north and Southern Avenue to its south both have huge parking structures. So there's no real demand there. And I think it's a pretty solid load-bearing station. There's not much to improve. Courthouse is probably a B. On one hand, it has several entrances that are pretty well spaced out. It is pretty deep, especially for that stretch coming from the Roslyn area. I would like to see maybe a west entrance, and there have been studies into that. Just, again, there's a lot of entry points, but they all funnel into one mezzanine on the east side. Something on the west would probably be well used and help really expand the utility of this station. It's pretty far from Roslyn. It's actually quite further than it probably could be. And it's relatively close to Clarendon, as mentioned earlier. So maybe moving it further to the east would be a little bit of an improvement. But again, it's a solid area, a solid station serving the area around it. There's not a much of critique there. Crystal City's coming up. This might be a little bit controversial, but I'm going to put it C tier. It has that one entrance as currently existed, and granted, it connects to the Crystal City Underground, but as it currently exists, the Underground is essentially dead, and it will be officially dead come October. And that one entrance isn't really great located. It's Route 1 is right next to it. I feel like it would have been better to have maybe this station have two entrances straddling Route 1, where it has one where it's currently located and then another entrance, if you would move it further to the west, on the other side, close to Eads Street. Currently, there's plans to build a second entrance. This is mainly being funded to appease Amazon, and Smith is funding most of it out of pocket with some help from the county and the federal government and a bit of the Commonwealth, too. I don't think that next entrance is really going to be a game changer. It really will save a block, and it's not really stretching the catchment area much because of the GW Parkway, and the train tracks really confine it on the east side. So you're not really doing much. It's more for the developers, I feel, than actually creating accessible transit. But again, that's not part of the current system, so I won't use that in my evaluation. Next up is Deanwood. Deanwood's a real solid station. It does the best with what it could do. So I let me frame it like that. It is straddled by train tracks in DC 295 right there, and the Anacostia River to a lesser extent with Kenilworth Park nearby. So there's not a ton of area for development, but for how it's built, it does a good job of bridging the train tracks and really servicing both sides of the community there. A decent amount of residences nearby, way better than Cheverly to the north, and we'll see about Minnesota Avenue, but it does well for what hand it was dealt. I'll leave it at that. Except we had downtown Largo. This is a terminal station. This is probably, I think I'll put it as a low A station. It is built with a pretty solid connection to the Beltway, just one exit and you go right there. Decent amount of parking. I like how they did it where it kind of straddles the station itself. That's a new design. You could tell this is a station built after the original system because they do implement some design improvements. One that came to mind is the connection between the two garages. So if one's filled, you could just go from one to the other without having to exit. It does have a pretty solid bus loop, too, to serve points further west. I think this is a solid location. Would have been a bit better if the Capitol Center were still around. It was constructed in the final years of that stadium's life, and the stadium was actually demolished before downtown Largo even opened. So that's a little unique there. But it as a terminal station, it does its job pretty well, has a lot of quality of life features, making it a good terminal, has those tailed tracks too, which allow it to be serviced in the morning and in the evening much better than it would have otherwise. Okay, next up, technically this station is named Washington Dulles International Airport. In my system, I put it just as Dulles, so it's under the D's. I'm going to put this up as an A tier. I'm real conflicted because there's parts I love and there's parts I hate about this station. Let's begin with the parts I love, and that will probably be its design. It looks great, but also in terms of its ability to move people to the airport. There are 4 elevators from the platform down to the mezzanine. That's perfect for people with bags. It has a lot of fare gates, especially the wide fare gates, again, designed with people with bags in mind. And it's probably a little deeper than it could have been. Like that, I get that's inconvenient, but the elevators make that a little bit easier to deal with. The downside, it's not particularly close to the terminal. And I get it could be frustrating. You take the train 70 minutes out to the airport, and then you've got to take a moving walkway. Granted, it is climate controlled underground moving walkway, so it is adapted well. And I get this is kind of out of Metro's control, and that was more a dispute with MWAA, who designed and procured this station. I think maybe a B tier is probably better for this. Again, closer to the terminal would have made it even better. Most people flying out of Dulles are doing long-haul international flights, so it's not a problem per se to walk an extra 2 or 3 minutes. And the station is well designed to handle those airport travelers. So I think B is probably better for it than the A. Next up is Dunloring. This is in the median of I-66, penultimate on the Orange Line. I'm conflicted. I don't have strong opinions about this. It has direct connections to the interstate, which is good. I feel people coming from further out west are going to just go to Vienna. So in that sense, it might not be super effective. There's currently plans of making it better transit accessibility to some of those developments nearby, which I think could do well. It serves Dunloring community in the neighborhoods there. So I guess that does justify some of the parking garage. And the development on the south side is actually real nice. So I'll give it a B for that reason. Next up, we had DuPont. DuPont's a solid A. It's a high A at that. It has 2 entrances, wide catchment, does pretty well. The south entrance is probably a little bit closer to Farragut North than it probably should have been, while on the alternative, the north entrance is much further from Woodley Park than it could have been. So that is a bit unique there. But beyond that, the 2 entrances have a wide area, a lot of neighborhoods and restaurants and businesses nearby, a lot of nightlife too. And it's a real solid station. The way the entrances are on the north and south side and they slant away really creates a wide area. And I find the north entrance really unique with just its huge circular cut and that new canopy that came in, which is nice. But there's not much improvement there besides, like, I guess going back to the system and maybe moving it a bit further up where I would have one entrance probably closer to the Hilton, and then the south entrance would be probably on the north side of the circle is probably how I'd redo that. But it's solid how it is. Nothing extraordinary. Eastern Market, that's a solid B. The 1 entrance is fine for this station. I don't think the demand warrants 2. A little bit close to Potomac Ave and Capitol South. Does serve 2 unique business areas. You got kind of the north side by the market itself and the south side by Barracks Row. So those are employment, those are restaurants, those are shopping, and it serves it really well. The neighborhood, too, is pretty solidly served. Again, the row houses at Capitol Hill build some solid density around there. I guess what I'd like to see differently is maybe if it weren't so close to those other stations, that could potentially be an improvement. On the other hand, I think it would have been unique, even if you have the 1 mezzanine like they do. If they had maybe a north and a south entrance from that, 1 feeding the market itself and 1 closer to the Marine Barracks. I think that could have been unique too and probably better serving that community. But solid B, nothing really to critique too much there. East Falls Church is probably a D station. Low density around it, single family homes. It's in the median of the interstate, which takes up some space. It's awfully far from Ballston and West Falls Church, but it's kind of isolated, just the geometry of the highway and some of the other routes there. You get, Langston nearby, kind of isolating the community. It's not particularly well addressed to pedestrians. As a transfer station to the Silver Line, I feel like the Silver Line would have been better suited with a transfer point closer to the junction between the Dulles Access Road and 66. For this one, the tracks merge, and then you go another 2 miles, and this is where it transfers. I just think as a transfer station, it probably could have been better designed. Granted, the metro system is kind of working backwards in that regard, where the station was already built and constructed, and then the Silver Line came. But they knew the Silver Line was a long-term plan. They could have maybe designed this a little bit better with that Dulles connection. Eisenhower Avenue, this is probably a D tier as well. I like some of the development around there, but in terms of a transit station, it just isn't particularly great. It's on the south side of Eisenhower, but it's kind of constrained by the Beltway and Cameron Run. So the catchment basin is completely north, and it's not particularly far from King Street Station to begin with. So the Kings, again, you have those 3 stations just so close together. You have King Street, Braddock Road, and Eisenhower Avenue. I feel like some spacing could have been better utilized there. And I feel like if you were to have a station there, put it closer to the movie theater and the development. Where they built it, it's just surrounded by parking lots and the Beltway to the south. And it's not like there's even great connection to the Beltway. So I just don't think it's a particularly well-designed station. Farragut North, this is probably a C, I think. Yeah, C is probably where I put it. It would be better to have that connection with Farragut West. That's really holding it back. It has 3 entrances, which is unique, each one with its own semi-mezzanine, even though 2 of them probably could have shared a mezzanine. The one at L could have had one mezzanine for the northwest and northeast and the southwest corners. Each one has their own unique mezzanine. That feels a little overbuilt to me. And it's very dense there having K Street. It's definitely justified having a station there, but it would have been even better with the connection. Farragut West, and I think for the very same reason, I'll put it as a C. Could have used that connection. It's relatively close to McPherson Square. I feel like those are almost too close. Granted, that's the heart of downtown, but it really could use some breathing room, I feel like. I like how there's entrances on each side. Really is a wide catchment. You got the one at Farragut Square, and then you got the other one on 18th Street. So that's solid, but this would just be so much better served with a direct metro connection between the 2 Farragut stations, and it's been in their long-term plans, even since the beginning. There's that old rumor with the Park Service forbidding that connection under Farragut Square. So it's definitely been on the minds of Metro, but something as of currently built, leaving something to be desired. Federal Center, I don't have strong opinions about this. I think for that reason, probably put it as a high C, low B. It's relatively close to L'Enfant Plaza. It's a little bit further from Capitol South on the other hand. Serves some employment. There's a couple of federal agencies down by there. There's the FAA, there's the Voice of America. Decent amount of tourists. I feel like less tourists use this than probably they should. Most people don't realize how close this is to the Air and Space Museum and the American Indian Museum as well. So I feel like that is more of a branding problem than anything. The one entrance is probably well suited. You know what? I'll move it up to a B. I feel like it's nothing special about this. Nothing terrible either. Next up, we have Federal Triangle, and this is very similar to Federal Center, where it's relatively close to its neighboring stations, mainly serving employment centers, this time with the Department of Commerce and the Reagan building and the Clinton building right there. I'd probably put this in a C versus a B just because it's so close to Metro Center. Tourists do use it for the White House and the Washington Monument, which I think is good. Again, Smithsonian, just the branding of that alone makes it much more marquee for that. So nothing Metro could really do there besides maybe putting White House in the name. But it's a solid station. Direct entrance to the Reagan building provides a better utility for the conferences and events there. Nothing much to add, though. I feel like the stop spacing is a little bit too tight. Foggy Bottom is up next. Foggy Bottom's a solid station. Let's give it an A. Far enough from Farragut West, where it has its own sphere of influence. Only one entrance, and I feel like this could justify a second one on the east side. Connects well to the university there, to the hospital, to the restaurants and the shops. It's kind of the de facto Georgetown station at the moment. And for that purpose, one would have liked it maybe a little bit closer to Georgetown, but it wasn't designed for that. It just kind of had it shoehorned into that by the virtue of Georgetown not getting a station of its own. Forest Glen, this pains me. This is probably a top 3 favorite station of mine, but I'll probably have to put it as a C and a low C at that. It's relatively deep. What am I saying? Relatively. It's the deepest station in the system. The way that it's kind of improved is that it's only elevators. It's the only station without any escalators, and that makes the connection a little bit better. But it's, in a sense, kind of like Eisenhower Avenue, where it's close to the Beltway, but not necessarily really a great connection for commuters. And it also doesn't have great connections to the community. I feel like the Beltway kind of serves as a natural barrier. So it really only services the residences to the north of the Beltway, and the south, even though it's not terribly far, many would probably be even easier just walking to Silver Spring. I do have to say, it being built at its depth, the elevators were the way to go. And I feel like it kind of made it a little bit well received. It aged better than its twin station up in Wheaton we'll talk about later. And with that at Forest Glen, I like it a lot. I think it's very humble, but it isn't particularly well designed as a transit station. Fort Totten, this is a transfer station. It's the only transfer station like this outside of the core. You could tell it's not ideal for a transfer station. Probably a C, just because you have one line which is partially underground, subsurface, and then you have another elevated line. And transferring between those two just isn't particularly convenient. There's only really one, like they have steps connecting the mezzanine in between. But if you want to make that transfer, you got to go down, and there's not a ton of steps from the red line or escalator to the mezzanine already. And then you have to go and turn. And again, there's not much connection from the mezzanine down to the green line. So it doesn't really serve as a transfer station too well. And as a community station, neighborhood station, it's surrounded by national parkland and industrial uses. It's pretty far from the neighborhoods surrounding it. So for that reason, I think it's probably a C tier. It is a transfer station out of the core, so that's solid. It's not terrible. I think the elevator is kind of unique in having just one shaft connecting all 3 levels. I think that's pretty nice and actually pretty elegant for its design. But I think it is leaving a lot to be desired there. Okay, I'm going to try and speed this up. We still have 2/3 left, and this has already gone on for a while. So Franconia Springfield, I'm probably going to put at a B. It's solid, decent connection to 95, so points south are well served by it. It has a lot of parking garage. I just don't think it's well connected, but it has that intermodal to the VRE, so there's that. Friendship Heights, this is going to be the first S tier. It has great connections, good mix of density, neighborhoods, development. Would have liked to see maybe something where the bus garage is now, but it has 2 entrances, north-south, and then Up at the top, there's 4 separate connections. I guess there's 3 now. Gallery Place, this is going to be controversial. I'm putting this as probably a low D, even maybe an F tier. You know what, I'll put it at F. And the reason why is it's a decent station for serving the points around, where it has great connection to the downtown core, to the stadium and all that. But it's just a terrible, terrible transfer station. Metro could not have designed a worse transfer station. The platforms are thin. The alignment of the T junction makes it really tough to transfer from green to red. And I understand that there were issues with the National Gallery and digging so close and the street alignment. But if Metro could start over, they would have to redo this from scratch. Up next, Georgia Avenue. This is probably high B, I would say. One entrance with both sides of Georgia Avenue. I feel like it would have been maybe better served further north, like closer to Petworth, but it's fine as it is now. Serves that community there. Glenmont is it's not a great terminal station. It has a ton of garage and it has the rail yard right there. And it's the only underground terminus outside of Mount Vernon Square, if you count that. But it just doesn't have a great connection to larger community. All the other terminals have direct connection to roadways and big bus bays, and this just isn't it. Greenbelt, on the other hand, talk about a good terminal. This is a high A, probably close to an S tier, but this has direct connection to the Beltway, lots of parking, intermodal transfer to the MARC train as well. It does have a connection to the west side of the community. I feel like it would be a little bit better to have a little bit more connection there, and there's some efforts to do that with the FBI potentially moving their headquarters. We'll see. But it's still really solid. I guess the other thing I'd like to add is maybe the Beltway connections only go from points north, and I get that's geared to 95 in that junction a couple miles north from the station. But it would have been good to see some symmetry there, so people coming from the Beltway from points south could have also had a direct entrance to the parking lot. Next up, Greensboro. Greensboro's, I'd say it's pretty mid. It's probably a C tier. It's quite close to Spring Hill. The development's not fully in yet, so I don't want to judge it on that. One side is like a strip mall and car dealerships, and the other is high-rises. It has a potential to be good. It is in the median or Route 7, though, so it makes it less ideal than some of the original plans to have it underground. Next up, we had Grosvenor Strathmore. This is a D. I don't love this. It's directly north of the 270 Beltway interchange right there. It's kind of isolated. It has that tunnel under Rockville Pike, or is that still Wisconsin Avenue at that point? I think it's Rockville Pike up there. So it connects that side, and it has a direct bridge to the Strathmore Music Center. But beyond that, it's surrounded by Beltway, 295, and Rock Creek Park. And it just isn't a super well-served station. Herndon is up next. Herndon's probably this is probably a C tier. I think it's right next to Greenbelt. It's just one of the Silver Line. There's nothing special. The median Dulles Toll Road. It does connect to that park and ride facility that has been there well before the subway got extended there. So there's a connection there with a decent amount of garage space, decent amount of bus bays and such. But in terms of serving the local community and business district, it just can't do that too well being in the median of the highway. Next up is Huntington. Huntington's tough because I think it's a great station. I don't think it's a great terminal station. So with that in mind, I'm going to probably put it at a D tier because for better or for worse, it is a terminal station. It just doesn't serve that too well. I like how it connects both Huntington Road and Kings Highway. kind of has like the north and south, so a wide catchment. But it just doesn't make it easy to use for the community, where if you want to walk there, you still have to walk close to a quarter mile from the nominal entrance to get down to the actual fare gates. And that makes it tough. It doesn't have a real great connection with the Beltway either. And Kings Highway and Richmond Highway are both decent amount of commuter feeders, but it doesn't have the same presence that having a direct Beltway connection would provide. Let's see what's up next. I'd probably put Hyattsville Crossing. This is probably a B tier. It is very compact. It has a garage above it. This is formerly Prince George's Plaza for people who still call it that. It has a good connection to the mall there. There's apartments and development coming up there. There's actually a Metro-owned sky bridge directly to the mall, which is kind of unique infrastructure. I like how it's above ground, but it has 2 portals on each side that allows both cheaper construction, but also better access to the community, which is good, and more developable land. I'd say it's a real solid station. Innovation. This is probably a D. This might be bordering on F tier. I'll put it at F tier. The reason why is it really shouldn't have been built. It is relatively close to Herndon. It only has one entrance, and it mainly serves like hotels for Dulles Airport. It doesn't have it's already in the median of the highway, so it doesn't have a great catchment basin, but it's even less so considering that it is so close to the airport grounds, which stops all development there. I guess it's close to the Air and Space Annex, which is something. Judiciary Square, this, I feel such a doomer. This is probably another F-tier station. There's 2 entrances, but it's just so close, and I question all the time if this was even necessary for a station. It's so close to Gallery Place. It is doesn't really serve much development of its own. I guess you got some of the DC city government buildings and the building museum there. But I wonder if maybe Gallery Place would be shifted further east, make it a proper cross junction right there. And I wonder if this would even be necessary, where you would have one entrance on the east side of Verizon Center and one on the west, and would completely eliminate the use for Judiciary Square. It's just so close. It's a block and a half from Gallery Place. And granted, it's far from Union Station, but most of that land isn't super development friendly with the 395 freeway bisecting it. King Street Station, this is a C. It has great infrastructure and facilities. I like how it has the 2 entrances on both sides of King Street. Question is location. I think this would be incredibly better served if it went down downtown, closer to the water. Having it so far in the west of Old Town Alexandria makes its connection to many of the shops, businesses, houses much more difficult. It really, on the west side, it is confronted with the Masonic Temple, which is a nice point of interest, but I feel like this station would have been better served downtown Alexandria. On the other hand, it is also close, as I mentioned, to Eisenhower Avenue and Braddock Road. Up next, we have Landover. Landover is close to Cheverly. Probably going to put it right next to Cheverly on the F tier for very similar reasons. It's kind of compounded between 50 and the train tracks. Mainly serves industrial uses out there. There's a lot of industrial parks which aren't really great places to build transit, in my opinion. It doesn't serve a lot of residences or people. And for people commuting from further, I get that there's direct connection to 50, but I feel like a more natural boarding place is New Carrollton for that. Then Font Plaza, this is probably an A. It's a solid transfer station. It's a little overbuilt in my book. For what it has the widest platforms of any station in the system. And the reason why is they projected a ton of transfers between Southern Green Line and Southern Virginia, Southern Arlington. So they thought people would be getting off and then going to have to do a cross-platform transfer. For whatever reason, that didn't exactly materialize. But it's still a solid station, has 3 entrances. I would have liked to see a 4th one at the bottom of the T, closer to the wharf especially. That would have been very prudent with the current development down there. But a solid transfer station, can't complain. Next up, we have Loudoun Gateway. And anyone who clicked on this video knows where this is going. This might be the worst. Not might be, this is the worst station. There's zero reason for this. Huge park and ride facility there. Even though there's not a ton of connections nearby, it's in the flight path of Dulles Airport, so it's never going to be redeveloped. And it's mainly just serving data centers, which is the most industrial of industrial uses in the modern economy. There's huge footprints that employ maybe a dozen people at most, so it doesn't need much transit. I question why this was even built, and it's in the median of the highway to begin with. I wonder if Loudoun County just wanted another station of their own if they were going to join the metro system. Next up is McLean. McLean is one of the better of the Silver Line extensions. I'll put it as, it might even be S tier. I know it's bound by Dolly Madison 123, so it's not super transit accessible, but it has that bridge over, so it really connects the gap. And props to Capital One Corporation. They really turned this station into something quite nice and quite accessible. Nice bus bay there, kiss and ride facility serving people from actually living in McLean, going to the McLean station. That isn't really what you think of when you think of Old Town or residential McLean. There's a potential new entrance coming in, so that's great. Even better connections to the Capital One campus and Capital One Hall. But in terms of Silver Line, you can't really ask for much better. McPherson comes up next. This is an F-tier station. I hate to do it. So close to both Metro Center and Farragut West. The 2 entrances have a wide catchment, but I just question whether it was necessary. I think probably moving Farragut West further to the east would probably better serve this area downtown. Like it's a train station. It's not bad, especially with densities there. I think I'll move it up to a D. I think F would have been harsh, but it's just so close. I just don't think it is a super essential station to begin with. The entrances aren't exactly the most well kept too. Makes it tough to commute with. Up next, Medical Center. Medical Center's a B. It serves 2 big employment centers, decent residences nearby for the northern Bethesda, not North Bethesda, don't get me wrong, but the northern Bethesda area. So that is good. It's just very deep, so it makes transfers tough. It's really for final destinations. They built the new elevators, which I question the utility of, because they also have the new tunnel under Rockville Pike. So it's like you have the elevators connecting the east side of Rockville Pike, but you also have the tunnel. So it's like, what's the point of both? But it's a solid B. I think it's a good location and the facilities. It's the northernmost underground on the west side of the Red Line, so that's pretty cool. Metro Center, this is the S of S tier. It's an incredible station, perfect for transfers, real optimized, has 4 entrances too, so a wide catchment downtown. There's a reason this station has a Metro name. It really earned that and does it well. Minnesota Avenue, this is like a tick worse than Deanwood, so if Deanwood was a B, I'd give this a C. It's just tough being this is even closer to the train tracks in DC 295, so it's a tough connection, bridging that natural divide or artificial divide right there. Very close to the river too, so the development is tough. It's already kind of constrained, But it's gotten better. The city government built an office there. There's a little bit of restaurants and auto shops and stuff coming up nearby, but it's not a great station, to be honest. Just the straddling the train tracks makes it real tough. Morgan Boulevard's tough, and I'm going to put it at a D because it just really isn't a great station. It's far. Its main purpose was to serve FedEx Field, and it's still a mile from FedEx Field. You have to walk, and that's real far. Granted, it is optimized for the crowds of an NFL football stadium, so it has a lot of fare gates. It has a lot of vertical transportation in terms of elevators and escalators and stairs, and has wide platforms, so that's good. And I like that, again, both of its portals are underground, so it has the potential for future development, but just no development has come up. Literally, there's just forests surrounding the park and ride lot and a little bit of residences on the north side, but just not a real great station. And I question if FedEx Field weren't around, if this would even be a necessary construction. Mount Vernon Square coming up. I'm conflicted. I think this is a probably high C. And the reason why is it has only one entrance. Its main core is to connect to the convention center, but even so, that connection isn't great because it's kind of on the back side of the convention center. For a station named after Mount Vernon Square, it's like 2 blocks from Mount Vernon Square. So I would have liked to see it maybe moved a little further south. You could maybe even keep the M Street entrance, but just have 2 and have a north and a south one. Right now, it just has that one entrance. A lot of fare gates and vertical transportation for the crowds of the convention center. I think it's maybe a little bit overbuilt in that regard. Next up, Navy Yard. Navy Yard's an S-tier station, especially with the developments to the west entrance. It's geared for a game day traffic. That west entrance alone could handle 5,000 people in 30 minutes. So if you think the stadium's around 30,000 people alone, just that west entrance in half an hour could take close to 1/6 of the stadium. And granted, a lot of people walk, a lot of people bike, a lot of people drive, and the stadium's not always full. So it's really good. But beyond that, serving the community, it has an east and a west entrance, has agencies nearby with the Department of Transportation, a lot of high rises, a lot of condos, a lot of residents. It does a real good job serving transit. Naylor Road, on the other hand, sticking on the Green Line. This is probably a D-tier station. Huge parking lot, underutilized. It's an elevated station, which I question why necessarily. Just not a lot of development, nor a lot of residences. It's one of the lesser used stations in the system. The parking lot's always empty. Again, one of those stations became was converted to solar panels. Really shows you how useful that parking lot is. It's just not, I just think it could have been done a little bit better. New Carrollton, it's a terminal. It's not a particularly good terminal. Again, being constrained with the train tracks. I'll put it at a C tier. There's rooms to redevelop it with the Purple Line and more high-rise. As of now, I think it's C. I'd probably put it at B because it does have that intermodal to Amtrak, has that intermodal to MARC as well. It's not terribly far from the Beltway and Route 50. It's not convenient. It's not a particularly great terminal station, but it's not terrible. Up next, we have Noma Gallaudet. This is probably, I'm really on the fence about this one. I love this station. I'm going to put it at high A, maybe low S. And the reason for that is I think that it would be absolutely perfect if it had a connection under the train tracks. So that's in the pipeline, should be built by 2027. It's funded by the city government. Really connect its north entrance to Union Market in that area. But as of now, it's really elegant. It has a north and a south entrance, so a wide catchment area. And it's really, really elegantly designed because it has 2 elevators, but it's not overbuilt because both elevators serve both entrances. Same with the escalators and stairways. I think this was a really elegantly designed. It's a top 10 sneaky station in terms of ridership. Completely redeveloped that area. Perfect way for an infill station. Next up, North Bethesda. North Bethesda is, I hate calling it that. It's always going to be White Flint. It's a D. And I think it was designed to connect to the mall. You could tell that with the south entrance pointing right towards the mall. Now that the mall's gone, most of the development's on the north side, it just isn't well suited to that. I like how it is above ground, but has connection, has portals, allows for development and stuff all around it. But it really needs a north entrance, ideally directly to the Pike and Rose development. That would make this much better. Pentagon's tough because it's a station with a clear purpose, and to serve that purpose, it does it really well. It's serving the Pentagon, largest office complex in the world, so it makes sense that it has a high-capacity transit station. 2 lines, you have a direct connection to downtown, and you have a more long way with the blue line through Arlington Cemetery. The split-level platform's unique, but I think it's well justified by the circumstances and the proximity to the flying junctions. Solid station all around, serves its purpose well, and has the bus bay connection up top, so a lot of buses from Shirley Highway drop off there. Pentagon City, on the other hand, I'd put this at a B. That area is developing better, especially with Amazon coming in soon. You have kind of 2 entrances each side of, what is that, Hayes Street? One directly to the mall and one to the other mall, I guess. So definitely a shopping destination. Serves those shopping destinations well. It's directly connected to each. Just at the moment, I would like to see something on the south side, maybe closer to the Delray. That's not quite Delray, but what's it called? Virginia Highlands neighborhood. Serving some of the residences a little bit better. It's a solid B. It's a role player. Potomac Ave, I think it is everything I like about Eastern Market, but better. So I'm going to put it probably at an A tier. It's not trying to be what it isn't. It's doing its job, clocking in 9 to 5, and it does that very, very well. High density with a lot of the row homes by there of Capitol Hill. It's a little close to my liking to Stadium Armory and Eastern Market, so that is something to keep in mind. It isn't, it could probably have been done better. I think that Stadium Armory to Capitol South stretch could have maybe had 1 fewer station if you move things around. So right now there's 4, maybe I think 3 would have been a little bit better. But for what it's worth, Capitol South, it has 1 entrance, but it only needs 1 entrance. Underground, but right in the heart of that neighborhood. It serves it really well. Potomac Yard. This is the newest station. I don't love Potomac Yard. It's probably a D tier. I think it's overbuilt. You talk about overbuilt, Potomac Yard comes to mind. 10 elevators. And even when you come out, there's no clear direct connection. It's isolated so much from its surroundings. You got the connection on the east side to that neighborhood is already farther to walk up that trail. Connection on the west side, you cross the bridge and you have further pedestrian bridges. And on the north side, you still got to walk to some of that development. So it's already isolated. Some of that's necessitated by the train tracks and the rail yard that used to be there that gave it its name. But it isn't a particularly well-designed station. It's overbuilt, and even with that, it doesn't do anything great. Up next, we have Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. It's a foil to Dulles, but I think it is a better foil than Dulles. And for the reason why is, unlike Dulles, it is so incredibly close to the terminal. I'm not exaggerating, it is a 25-second walk from the platform to the TSA line, which is absolutely incredible. When it was built, it wasn't built with that direct connection in mind, but it actually did get much better as the airport kind of built itself around the station. And now it's probably one of the best transit airport connections in the country. So that's great. The reason why it's not S tier and why I have to put it at A is people are traveling to the airport with bags. There's one escalator serving each platform on each side. That's kind of the unique thing with the triple track formation there. And that's just not enough, especially people with big luggage. And the elevators, too, are so unique because there's one on each platform. And they connect to kind of a hidden mezzanine that makes it tough to access the terminal. So if I were redoing it, great location, great connection, probably would have just changed the vertical transportation to gear itself to the airport uses. Up next is Reston Town Center. This is probably one of the better of that stretch of the Dulles Toll Road transit lines. It's still not great. It's far from the Reston Town Center area. When the Silver Line was being developed, there was talk of it kind of diverging from the median of the toll road and going into downtown Reston. And that wasn't built, but I think that would have been much better. It still has solid densities of both offices and restaurants and residences. Only one on that stretch without a park and ride. So I think it's probably a B, but it still isn't great. Rhode Island Avenue. This is probably a B. When it opened, I think it would have been a C. But at the moment, B makes the most sense because they have that connection to the Metropolitan Branch Trail. There's been further development. The old surface lot is now a garage, so more development there. I think this is a promise of what good transit-oriented development could become with WMATA guidance as well and city leadership. Up next, Rockville. Rockville's tough because it serves a major metropolitan core and exurban core, suburban core. Probably a B. It has entrances to both sides, so it has connections to the neighborhood, but also downtown. But its proximity to Rockville Pike kind of constrains some of its development. I appreciate that it has that pedestrian walkway, kind of bridging that gap. Maybe I'll put it at A. I'm kind of talking myself into it. It's solid. Roslyn. Roslyn's, I think, serves a great business community. Has the new entrances with the elevators. It's still very deep. That's probably why I'll put it at B and not A. So tough to transfer. I think it's necessitated by being so close to the Potomac. But it's really served that community well. The two entrances seem about right. In terms of transit, this is really the biggest bottleneck in the system. So I think ideally this would have separate platforms for the blue and then the orange and silver. You see that with some of their studies that WMATA is going through. Shady Grove. This might get some controversy. I'm putting it at S tier. I know it's a terminal. I know it has all the big park and rides. But this is, if designing for a terminal in mind, this is perfect. It has huge garages and parking lots that actually get filled. Even with that said, it's relatively compact, unlike Branch Avenue with just sprawl. It has connections to the neighborhood. They're not great, but the Durwood neighborhood is served, and there's some shops and restaurants on the other side on Rockville Pike. I think most importantly, it has a direct interstate serving exclusively it. I-370, it's one of the shortest interstates in the country. And basically the only reason it was built, was to connect 270 to the metro station. That's how perfect it is. People coming from points north. And even with that, even being a terminal, it's, I think, the second busiest station in Maryland. So it serves its community well. Shaw Howard U, this is probably A, high A, kind of with Reagan Airport in that regard. High density, serves its area well. It has two entrances, so it has a wide connection. I think it's probably a little close to U Street and Mount Vernon Square. Some of the stop station could have been a little bit better. I don't think the densities are necessarily there to serve that. But yeah, it's solid, real good. Silver Spring, controversy. This is going to be a D. I don't love Silver Spring Station. Its location is just really odd. It does have that intermodal connection, both with the big transit center, biggest grift right there, and the MARC platform. So there's that connection there. But as it's currently built, it's not great. It has two entrances, but they basically just serve the same side of the Colesville Road intersection there. I would have liked to see something, and they're kind of correcting this with the third entrance directly to the future Purple Line, not even direct, my goodness. So it's not even that close to like downtown Silver Spring. I think closer to the mall would have been a little bit better. It being on the railway right away makes it tough. I just don't love this. Send me flack if you think. Smithsonian. This is a low B. I don't love Smithsonian. I think it serves tourists mainly by the branding more so than its actual capacity to do so. You think of museums by there, and there aren't even really that many museums by 12th Street. I guess the American history is 2 blocks away. But you think Smithsonian, and it's by the castle, but tourists really don't go to the castle. They go to the museums. It does serve the Department of Energy and the Department of Agriculture as well, and that's much better served. That's why it's at a B, I think. The two entrances actually create a decently wide catchment too, which is nice. Up next, Southern Avenue. I'm going to put this with Naylor Road because I think they're really cut from the same cloth. This one might actually be worse than Naylor Road. Might put this as an F tier just because it's surrounded by parkland. It's so isolated from the community. There's no residential connection nearby. So that is awfully bad for that. There's a huge parking lot that rarely gets used. The parking lot utilization was incredibly low. I would have liked to see something more ingrained with even a low density residential community. I think would have been served better. Spring Hill's probably the worst of the Tyson area. Silver Line, gonna put it at D. So it's just the development isn't there. It's used car lots right next to it. It's in the median of 7, right by the Beltway, but it's not getting any. Pardon me, not Beltway, right by the, the toll road. But it's not getting, if you're coming from points north on the toll road, just go to Wheelie. There's no park and ride or anything, so it doesn't utilize its proximity to that. And it in the future, the development might change that area and make it better. But even so, you're in the median of a highway, of a strode, and you're connecting to used car lots. Stadium Armory, when it was built, it was much better because it actually served an active stadium. Now I'm probably putting it at B. Like the other stadium stations at Navy Yard and Morgan Boulevard, the turnstiles and vertical transportation is high capacity, which is great. On the other hand, I think as it is today, it's kind of overbuilt, and that's no fault of its own. But just without the stadium there, it's like, do you really need 2 entrances? And especially, it's just parking lots and industrial use. The armory's right there, the city jail's right there, neither of which are huge employment centers. You did get some residential, both row homes and more developments recently. So that's a plus. Suitland's probably going to be a B. Connects to a huge federal center right there. So employment is there, huge parking lot, connection to Branch Avenue, the road, not the station. Real solid, I think. Its entrances are fine. Not much to say. It's just another role player station doing what it's intending to do decently well. Tacoma, I don't really love. One entrance doesn't exactly serve the Tacoma community great, kind of with the way the train tracks are lined up. It does serve both DC and Maryland communities. There's a minor surface lot there, which isn't a park and ride, but it also isn't really great being a kiss and ride day lot, like it was part of the give and take between the community and Metro when it was being built. Up next, we have Tinleytown. I don't love Tinleytown too much. It's incredibly deep. I'll put it as a low C tier, so probably at the end of C tier, I think. And the reason, I think it has entrances on both sides of Wisconsin, so that's good, but it's just so deep, and it serves, I feel like something maybe on the north entrance could have also served some of the residences and helped spark some development down Wisconsin for the north. Yeah, I think C tiers fits it well. It has one escalator or elevator straight from the platform. Tacoma also has that, go figure, which I don't love that either. Guess it's efficient, but it kind of creates a prime space for fare evasion. If you've gone to this station, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Just incredibly deep, too, so it makes it tough to transfer. Twinbrook was just at Twinbrook the other day. I'm going to put this at a high C, I think. So that seems about right. Straddles the line along this railroad corridor, has denser development on the west and then low density suburbs on the east. It serves both of them. Has that huge garage there that gets a little bit of fill, but not a ton. I just don't think there's anything great or special about this. Tyson's, I think outside of McLean, is probably the second best Silver Line station. I'll put it at A tier. You know what? I'll put it at B. And I'm going to do that. I think it's great. Without the Tyson station, Silver Line would not be built. Connects to the mall very well. But the north side of the station is just so undeveloped. It's just an empty lot. Like Circus Soleil comes there. And is that really the best use of a high-capacity transit station? I don't know. It'll change with time. I like how it has a direct pedestrian bridge to the mall. Ideally, this would be underground and a direct connection to the mall, kind of like Pentagon City. But there's a lot of changes coming at Tyson. At the moment, I think it's probably a B tier, but it has the potential to go up. U Street's an S tier station. Huge catchment basin with entrances on the east and west side. Serves 13th Street, but then also serves like closer to Vermont and Florida Ave. Lots of nightlife, high-rises, residences, even schools nearby. Serves all those well, museums and restaurants. This is a perfect station, I think. S tier is where it belongs. Union Station. This is my most used station by far. I did the math once. I've probably gone to this station over 1,000 times in my life, closer to 2,000 at this point. I just don't think it's a great station. For the while it has been the most used station, I don't think it holds that distinction anymore, but it's a top 3. And that's mainly due to its connection with the rail. I think that's what it gets right. It has great connection to Amtrak, decent connection to VRT, and phenomenal to MARC. So that's great. But in terms of a transfer station to a multimodal rail facility, I think it's important to have good vertical transportation, and this just doesn't have it. It has one escalator up and down in the north entrance and one elevator, people transferring with bags to the train station, makes it real tough and crowded. And the other thing is the south entrance, I just think would be better served if it were on Columbus Circle, even further south. Like the mezzanine's kind of in the middle of the station. When it was originally designed, that was the only mezzanine. But a lot of the station, beyond connecting to Union Station trains and restaurants and whatnot, it also serves the East Capitol Hill community, both residences there and the U.S. Senate office buildings. And you could see in the evenings, I'm walking home from my work by Union Station, and I see literally hundreds of people streaming from Russell and Dirksen and Hart headed straight to Union Station. I think the station could be better designed, especially with the amount of ridership. The capacity warrants it for a stage entrance on the south side of Massachusetts Avenue. And that potentially could happen with 2 of the 4 proposals in the Blue, Orange, Silver study have a new entrance there. So we'll see. but I think for the most used station, it definitely has a lot left to be desired. Van Dorn Street, this is a D-tier station. I don't love Van Dorn Street. It serves a lot of industrial uses. There's like a UPS fulfillment center. It straddles a beltway, but it doesn't really have a direct connection to the beltway. Small park and ride lot. The beltway serves as a natural barrier if you live in Fairfax County, just south of the station. It's not accessible unless you drive. It's just not particularly great. Honestly, it might be an F tier. I'm racking my brain to think of something redeeming about this. And I guess it's not overbuilt, so there's that. But it's an F tier station. Van Ness, this is a B. I like how it has great density, connections to universities, embassies, schools, houses, neighborhoods. It has entrances on both sides of Connecticut, which I like. I think it's a little close to Cleveland Park, just a little for my liking, but it's still solid. Vienna. Vienna's a solid terminal station. This is probably a low A. Has direct connection to and from 66. Has sufficient parking that actually gets used. It's not overbuilt. Bus bays connecting it to both Centerville buses, but also downtown city of Fairfax. I think ideally this Vienna station would have been built either north at Tyson or south in actually the city of Fairfax, closer to George Mason University. But for what it is, it's A. It's as a solid, where did I put it? Did I put it in A or B? Yeah, A is probably where it should go. Up next, Virginia Square. This is B. It's solid. I feel like I'm just a broken record with these on. It's a little close to Ballston. Maybe if you move Ballston a little further west, it would have had some straight to breathe. Maybe even C, to be honest. It's one entrance, which isn't bad. I think this is a one entrance station. It doesn't warrant a second one, but it's real close to Clarendon and Ballston. I'll put it back at B. I think you can't fault it for being a little bit too dense. Their density's still growing up. You got the university, George Mason Annex nearby. Waterfront. Waterfront's a C station. I think this would be much higher, closer to an A, if it were a little bit further to the west. And you could even keep the same entrance now at 4th and M, but then have another entrance at the wharf. And I get when this was built, the wharf wasn't even part of an idea. But having a station right at Arena Stage and an entrance right at Arena Stage and the wharf would have been huge. I think it's a real missed opportunity there. Up next, we have West Falls Church. This is an F station. When it was built, it was probably a D. It had a direct connection to the Dulles Toll Road. Now that's basically an abandoned entrance. It's technically still open, but it doesn't connect to anything. It's just an empty bus bay where Metro parks and stores some of its non-revenue fleet of like cars and maintenance vehicles. Even the south side isn't great. It is kind of isolated from the neighborhood there, kind of by design. They didn't really want a station. It's not particularly close to Route 7. Has a direct entrance from 66, but coming from the west, only on the west side. But I feel like if you're coming from the west side, you'll just go to Dunloring. It's not that much further, and I feel like that's a better station. I feel like since the Silver Line opened, there's just not a need for West Falls Church. And the north side is just the rail yard. So that's, again, undevelopable land right nearby. There's that high school nearby. I'd be curious how many high schoolers actually use it. It's just not numbers I have figures for. But that could potentially maybe make me rechange my assessment. West Hyattsville. This is a low C, probably a high D station. In this instance, I would say It's surrounded by parkland, which isn't great for a metro station. Low density development nearby. There's some houses and a bit of a strip mall, but it isn't. I feel like Hyattsville Crossing, Prince George's Plaza, whatever you want to call it, does that much better, where it actually has, it really leans into having the suburban development be transit accessible, when West Hyattsville just doesn't really know what it's going for. Is it serving neighborhoods? Is it serving these developments? Who knows? Wheaton's an F-tier station. This is like worse than Forest Glen and Silver Spring. Incredibly overbuilt. The garages are routinely, even before COVID, it was about a quarter filled. Incredibly deep. Deepest, longest escalator in the Western Hemisphere, which is a fun novelty. It's not good for transit. It just takes forever. And in fact, it's so deep that it almost hinders its ability to move people around. Just last week, there was an issue with the escalator, and they completely bypassed the station. That's how bad it was, where they said, okay, we'll have buses from Forest Glen and Glenmont, so just keep riding and get off there, which isn't good. Having most other stations would just say, oh, escalators down, you could walk up. But because it's so deep, Metro just bypassed the station altogether, and they fixed it within a couple hours. So it wasn't terrible, but just the fact that that's a possibility isn't good transit design. I say, when I mentioned Forest Glen earlier, just aging better, that's what I meant by that. We're having the 6 elevators directly to the platform, especially now with Metro making a much stronger, in my opinion, this is a tangent, a little bit misguided push to have redundant elevators at every entrance. Forest Glen just aged much more gracefully than Wheaton. And it's connected to that mall, and it's right at the intersection of a lot of roadways. But I feel like a lot of the residential communities nearby are often closer to Glenmont or Forest Glen. And if not, they're probably nearby that Kensington Mark station. It might just be easier to take the Mark into Union Station or downtown. Wheelie Reston East, a temporary terminus for the Silver Line. As a terminus, it was okay. As a current station, it's not great. It's not bad, probably low B tier. Similar to Reston Town Center, there was talk of a station closer off the access road median. I think that would have aged a little bit better, helped with the development. But that area is going up quickly. I think in maybe 20 years it'll be well justified, even between the highway median station and where it's developed. It's a little close to Reston Town Center, which is funny because the gap between itself and Spring Hill is close to 5 miles, the longest between any 2 stations in the system. And then it's less than a mile to the next station. So I feel like spacing could have been a little bit better, but it's not the worst Silver Line station by far. And then lastly, this is probably my second most used station. In high school, I'd go here twice a day to and from school. We got Woodley Park, and this is an F-tier station. I hate to say it, but F-tier all the way. It's not a great station design. Its original name was Zoological Park, but it's close to half a mile from the entrance to the zoo. So it's like, I see why they changed the name, but it's not on these kind of bounded on the east and south side is Rock Creek Park, which creates this natural barrier, but it's right up close to that too. I wish they would have had the station entrance. Instead, it is south of the station and goes down into the station. I wish it would have been north of the station, serving closer to the center of the Woodley Park neighborhood, but also closer to the zoo. And it wouldn't be bound up by the Rock Creek bridges. You got the Calvert Bridge and the Connecticut Avenue Bridge, which essentially are half miles of zero development potential. A nice park there. And it's incredibly deep as well, so you can't even really transfer too great. It's far from both of its neighbors. It's really far from DuPont. And I talked about this earlier with DuPont maybe being better designed to be a bit further north, or even having an infill at what's that, Kalorama or Columbia Road or whatever. I think that would have served itself well. And it's relatively far from Cleveland Park, too. So I think moving it a bit further north would have been much better. Ideally, it wouldn't be so deep either. It takes forever. But that's it. That's my tier ranking. You can see it's broadly bell-shaped with C and B tiers where most of the stations lie. Not a ton of S tier stations, but fortunately not a lot of F tier either. Definitely leave your thoughts in the comment below, what you're thinking of my rankings. Which stations did I rank too high? Which stations did I rank too low? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, if you're interested in making your own tier list, I'll put the link to this in the template in the description. So click that below and you could tag me. I'd love to see what you have to think. And thank you for sticking around this long. If you enjoy Metrorail discussion, history, trivia, and the like, please consider subscribing. I got some fun ideas coming down the pipeline. Thank you.